So this 30% turnout Liz Kaufman projected, we focused on quite a bit. And if you look at your report, she has a 25% cushion. It was just pointed out to me by my staff that Liz has said that 25% cushion was in addition to the 30%. So essentially, almost 38% is what her $100,000 is based on, is almost a 38% turnout. She projected 30, but in the 25% cushion in your report allows for up to a 38%. I'm being told by the experts in runoff elections, when there's one issue on the ballot in the middle of the summer, there is absolutely no way the turnout will be above 38%.
It's happened in Portland in the past.
What was on the ballot? What?
We had Commissioner Hale's seat was up for election, and I believe Commissioner Blumenauer.
That was, but those, okay, what I just said is in the middle of the summer. I mean, it's very important to look at the date an election is when people are on vacation and they're distracted and the kids are out of school. I personally know that the Hale's runoff election occurred after the kids were back in school,
right,
and parents were home. And you don't schedule, from my experience, union meetings in the summer. You don't schedule neighborhood meetings when you have a major initiative in the summer. And if you are running for office in the middle of the summer, you're going to have a real challenge getting people who would otherwise happily vote and always vote be home to vote. So what I'm not trying to debate whether or not that's right or wrong. That's not what I do. What I do is I look to people like Liz Kaufman, who I happen to know. If she says it's 30%, I'll make a wager for you right here. It's going to be 30%.
You know, when I'm listening to you talk about your experience, as a commissioner, we had consultants in the room as well testifying, and I forget her name. I think she said that's even more reason why we need to have sufficient funds, because it is so hard to get people's attention in the summertime. You can't run a bare bones campaign and expect a candidate to be able to reach people. It's difficult.
And I totally agree with you. And I think the part that I wish somebody would have on the commission more forcefully acknowledged is, if you have a lower amount, it's going to affect, in this instance, there is an incumbent. It's going to affect whoever the privately funded candidate is. And if that person makes that decision that they cannot reach the voters with 100,000, then they're going to raise 150, or they're going to raise 200,000, and the voter-owned candidate gets matched. I mean, it looks like this has been constructed, and I'm sorry, but the earlier email that came out makes it appear as though there's a bias for, well, if you're a privately funded candidate and now you've learned that the voter-owned candidate in a runoff gets 200,000, tough, too bad. Should have thought about that before you decided not to be a voter-owned candidate. That's how it feels. Mm-hmm. And that's not how this system is supposed to be constructed. It's supposed to level the playing field, not give a leg up to the voter-owned candidate. And it feels like nobody just in the room said, hey, just for the purposes of discussion, can we talk about that?
Well, actually, we did. And again, people who were in the room testifying said they'll be able to raise the money. Look, historically, they've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But why don't you turn that argument around and say, well, let's just take all the energy out of the thought that this is going to make us look biased. Take the number given to us by the consultant, and if they're going to raise more money, the voter-owned candidate gets it. Just problem solved.
Well, to some extent, of course, we do, because if you look at the numbers that people spent, they are a lot more, usually, than $150,000. And so we are counting on the matching funds to be there. It's just a matter of judgment as to what is a fair and sufficient amount.
I could argue, right now, literally, we have no rules for a voter-owned candidate. None. I would argue that you don't need any, because whatever the runoff candidate who's privately funded gets, and if we just say the voter-owned candidate gets matched, that's what it is. I wouldn't even have there be an upper limit. Some have suggested it be 200 or 250. I'd say no limit. Whatever that person raises, the voter-owned candidate gets. I mean, that's a radical approach, but it illustrates the point I'm trying to make, is this is a debate that feels like it's tilted one way for just the reason you picked the number that you have versus just accepting a lower number and saying if the privately funded candidate attempts to raise more, that's fine.
I do think there's merit in their argument that having some sort of threshold and being able to plan a campaign based on some sort of threshold is a compelling argument. And
that's-
not reliant, you're not suggesting that the expenditure of funds be entirely reliant on the non-voting candidate, are you?
No, I'm just saying that the thrust of the argument so far has been that, the voter-owned candidate, the appearance is by far going to have the benefit that the privately, I mean, you've even acknowledged in your discussion, this is going to be a challenge for the privately funded candidate to catch up with the vote. That's not why we created this system. It's just the opposite. It was level the playing field for, neighborhood activists, unknowns who could get in the system and compete with the privately funded candidate. And all of a sudden, we're having a discussion by even one commission member is saying, well, I'm concerned that the privately funded candidate can't catch up. And it just feels like the discussion has kind of got off track a little bit. And we should be talking about how you keep money out of campaigns, how we can lower the cost of campaigns. And it seems like it's just done a 180.
I think that's why, not everybody, but the majority of people who talked to us thought that coming down from 200,000 was a good idea, because they thought it perhaps would be an unfair advantage in a short time frame. And that's why we didn't come back to you and say, no, after much deliberation and looking at the facts, we think we should stay at 200,000. We came back and said, yeah, when you have 2.5 months, there is an overhead cost. We should lower it. 150 is a fair amount. So we did respond to that.
And I appreciate that.
Further questions? Thank you, folks. We have folks signed up to testify on this matter.
We have 3 people signed up.
Please call them forward.
Janice Thompson,